Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of How's the Shared Living podcast. This is episode 8 in season 6, and we are back again for another week bringing you the latest news, views, and insight from the rented shared living sectors. So if you work in and around PBSA, BTR, co-living, university accommodation, HMO, and rented later living sectors, you are in the right place. I'm Dan Smith from Resi Consultancy and Verbaflow AI.
I'm Deanie Lee from the Property Marketing Strategists.
And I'm Sarah Canning from the Property Marketing Strategists.
And now let's hear from our headline sponsor.
Housed is sponsored by Spotlight Boost on mystudenthalls.com. Use Spotlight Boost to stand out in search results and drive more leads to your properties.
We're delighted Dan and the team from My Student Halls have decided to be our headline sponsors once again for this season. They play such a big part in the student accommodation marketing cycle, so do go and get your properties listed wherever you can. It is really important that we're taking all leads that we can at the moment. It is not that easy out there to fill those beds, so do go and get your properties listed with My Student Halls. Also, a huge thank you to Wash Station, Utopia and Howden. We'll be hearing more from them later on. A quick note of celebration. We've just reached 25,000 downloads this week, and we get sent these little badges to celebrate by Buzzsprout, who we publish our podcast with. So a big thank you to anyone who has listened to even one episode. And Sarah and Deanie, I believe you're celebrating a key milestone this week, are you?
We are indeed. It's our 4th birthday of the Property Marketing Strategist. It's our 4th official birthday. We're a bit like the King. We have 2 birthdays, but this is the one which is when we registered our business as a limited company. So that's the one we celebrate. We were doing projects beforehand, before we established ourselves as a proper business. So yeah, we'll happily accept, cakes, champagne, chocolates, balloons, all of that.
I was going to say, I don't think we have actually got any celebration in place. We probably should do. But next year, when it's 5, then absolutely we'll organise something, I think.
But on the topic of celebrations, we have indeed reached 25,000 downloads of House, but we also have a YouTube channel as well. So actually, there's even more than 25,000 because some of you lovely lot like to watch some of our studio recordings as well. So do head over to the Housed YouTube channel to have a look at that as well. And also another exciting milestone that we'll be reaching in the next few weeks is our 100th birthday episode. We are planning a celebration for that. So yeah, keep an eye out, and we'll hopefully be celebrating with as many of our listeners as possible.
So without further ado, let us get on to the episode. Now, Sarah and Deanie, I know you're very, very close to this one. I want to talk about the hereSAY leasing and benchmarking report for BTR, which I think it's a really good comprehensive report. And I think it gives really good insight into, where things are at with regards to leasing at the moment in BTR, and not necessarily the strict performance and exactly how things are going, but, what works, what doesn't, best practice, etc. So, yeah, do you want to talk us through that?
Yeah, so we work with hereSAY. We partnered with them in developing their PBSA mystery shopping service, but we don't have anything to do with the BTR service. So we were just as fascinated as everybody else to read the benchmark report. We have lots of conversations with the team at hereSAY who see lots of similarities across sectors in the performance of viewing, inquiry handling, viewing experience quality, follow-up, etc., across the shared rented living sectors. But this is a deep dive really into BTR. I think that they are, as we are, very keen to point out, this isn't about customer service. This is about how likely are the staff that are dealing with inquiries likely to convert an inquiry or a viewing into a secure booking. And they use mystery shoppers across the UK to try and find out that and test the staff there. So we really recommend that anybody that's working in the shared living sectors downloads the benchmark report for a really, really deep dive into it. The bit that I found really, really interesting is because of this data and because of the fact that like we said, in partnership with them, they've got PBSA data from all the mystery shops that have happened as well. There's a bit that compares the experience with all of the shared living sectors. And I found that really, really interesting. There are some areas that the shared living sectors perform really, really well at. So, for example, building an apartment presentation. So the show flats that people see when they go on a viewing, that's really, really highly scored. And the previewing experience as well is really highly scored. So that's great to see. Where the sector as a whole is falling down really is on the post-viewing experience. It's that follow-up. It's what happens after somebody has a viewing. And actually, PBSA is performing the lowest in that. We do a lot of sales and marketing training, and actually we're going to be beefing up that section of our training because we've seen that actually it seems to be really, really hard for the sector to perform well on that. Deanie, what did you see from the report that you want to discuss?
I think just like you, it's more that kind of looking at it from a whole sector approach in how everyone's performing. Obviously, we are involved in the PBSA version of this service, of the mystery shopping service. So it's really good to see that in BTR. But what it does show for PBSA is that PBSA is largely behind BTR in most of these areas. The ones where it is ahead, interestingly, is brand and marketing and viewing experience, which I think aligns with what we always say is that the team on site give that great experience, that great customer service, and they deliver that time and time again. But overall, I think there still needs to be more investment from PBSA in this. And I think the other thing that I kind of noted is in the top 5 operators in the benchmarking report, none of those are those that also run PBSA. So if you are going into that kind of diversifying and expanding, you're into kind of BTR from a PBSA or vice versa, you need to up your game really, because it is all BTR operators that are kind of ahead of the game when it comes to this, because they probably have to be largely.
I mean, I think the other thing really is that we always talk about on the podcast that, you know, there are lots of different types of tenants living in lots of different types of properties as well. So if you're looking at BTR co-living, single family housing and PBSA, they're all competitors. So, you know, if somebody is a student, say, and they're going to see a PBSA scheme and a single family housing scheme and a co-living scheme and a BTR scheme, they won't know that there's any difference. They're just looking for somewhere to live. But if the post-viewing experience is so bad from one of those, why would they book with you? So that's, you know, I think that's a real wake-up call, and that's what I would take from it. The other area that PBSA score really badly is incentives and value for money. And I mean, we see the verbatim reports from the students that are mystery shopping, and they are genuine students from across the UK. And some of it's just not from selling the value. It's not necessarily that the value isn't there. It's just maybe that the staff aren't really eking out that value. And that's exactly what we do in our sales and marketing training, is to try and really make people think about it. But as we talk about time and time again, I think BTR is really different to PBSA in that BTR generally have leasing staff. So these people are recruited, they're trained, they're developed, and their only job is to lease up that building. In PBSA, they're doing a myriad of other things as well. And so it is really, really difficult, because those people that are doing viewings, that are responding to inquiries, aren't necessarily recruited for that role. They're probably recruited because they have great customer service and they know how to operate a building. But selling is a completely different skill. And as I keep pointing out time and time again, nobody is criticising customer service in the sector. It's incredibly high. People are polite, they're friendly, they're personable. We've never come across anything in a PBSA mystery shop that would contradict that. But it's very different being a lovely person to actually selling something. And that's really the whole point of this service. And that's exactly why we wanted to develop the PBSA version of this with hereSAY, to try and elevate those skills and those KPIs and the sales performance in the sector. So
I think everybody in PBSA in particular is typically a generalist at a site level. Like, a general manager needs to be able to sell, needs to be able to deal with resident queries, understand maintenance and the BMS and the PMS, and really understand how to run a building overall. You can then hire, if you really wanted to, you know, assistant general managers, etc. But again, they're typically generalists. When you look at BTR, yes, you have leasing specialists, you have specific, you know, people within each property who are focused on filling those beds. They don't have to worry about what's happening with maintenance or housekeeping or staffing or anything like that. Their focus is to sell those beds. So I think that's, you know, that is where BTR is stealing a march, and you've got people who have got the time to do the follow-ups. But one interesting thing, the report didn't really mention AI. And I think when you look at things like previewing, inquiry handling, speed and consistency of inquiry, consistency of responses, that matters. Clear, accurate information at first touch, obviously that matters. And that's me pulling information from the report. And then the follow-ups, they really matter. Well, all of that can be automated. And to a certain extent, you can automate it within a traditional old school CRM. But that is where AI will come in and help to, to support those people. Because if there's something that shines through in this report, it's that rental real estate, BTR in particular, is all about the people and those interactions. And I think that's where, it does need to be. You can't just throw the baby out with the bathwater and just implement AI and that is it. You've really got to make sure that you train your staff properly and you train your teams properly to either, use AI, but primarily just to be dealing with people when they want and, resolving any queries that they have. So I think that's where we will start to see a change in some of these reports in the feedback that we're getting, because those residents, whether they're students or young professionals or families or whatever, they will have the instant responses. They will have things a bit more automated over the course of the next 18 months to 2 years, and it will alleviate some of that, in my opinion. But you cannot replace that human element in such a big purchase.
I won't put you on the spot, Dan, but it would be interesting for you as Verbaflow to go through the results and see how many of the top performing ones are actually clients of yours, because I guess it's testament probably to AI if the customer doesn't know it's AI necessarily. So they might be rating, like, for example, the previewing experience in BTR was rated as 86%. Well, some of that could have been comms from AI and the customer may not even know about it. So you're right, that would be interesting to kind of compare that service. But I guess that's the point of kind of customer focused AI, is you want it to be seamless and you just want people to get great instant responses without them feeling like it's a bot in any way.
I think there's also two forms of follow-up in some respects. There is that instant follow-up that AI can do, that is that kind of, hey, I know you came for a visit, how'd it go? But then there's that more nuanced follow-up, which is from a person to a person, of the person that spoke to each other, that AI is never going to be able to do unless you input all that information in and then it sends it out automatically. And it'd be interesting to know actually whether the most mystery shoppers can tell which is AI and which isn't AI, and whether they're feeding back on the AI version or waiting for the real human to come back and say, how did you feel about it?
Yeah, I'm just looking at the list of properties that I think they've mystery shopped here, and because they're broken out individually, I don't know if like Moda or anyone is within that. But we know that the majority, when it's over voice, we know that the majority of sort of BTR residents, if they're UK residents, typically will know that it's AI. International students, they don't. Like a lot of the time, you can hear it in calls that ultimately they just don't know that they're talking to an AI. With WhatsApp, with email, with all of the other channels that Verbaflow's on, for example, you don't necessarily know. You don't really need to know. As long as you're getting the answers that you want, that's pretty key. But Dina, you're right. It's got to be done in conjunction with proper human follow-up so that you can have instant responses. Like, you don't need a human to tell you what the cancellation policy is. You don't need a human to, tell you if there's a plug next to the mirror so you can plug your straighteners in or whatever. All of that can just be automated, because that's just a quick, FAQs, which normally people would just go through the FAQs document and have a look through the list and look through the websites. Now people just want to ask questions and get the exact answer that they need. And that's where AI comes in. But again, those leasing teams are still going to be super important. There's one really interesting thing that I find about the US market. This is a slight tangent. Who knows? We might edit this out. But I'm on a panel at Real Estate Technology Conference in Vegas next week. I'll probably mention that 3 or 4 times for the rest of this episode. But it's about centralization. And I think you've got, in the US, it's so decentralized where properties are bigger in multifamily and also in student housing. And so you have a huge number of people on site, and you have really small HQ teams. Whereas in the UK, we have smaller site teams and we have bigger HQ teams. So they're starting, and so we have more centralization in the UK and Europe already. And I think that's what the US is starting to see, that works better for the investors primarily, because then you have less cost on site and they have more third-party operators out there. So most of those costs are being borne by investors rather than the sort of traditional owner-operators or the vertically integrated. And so that centralization is going to be really interesting to see, given that is happening now, where site teams and those leasing teams, some of those are being made redundant because they are moving everything to a more central basis. And, I think they're 2 years ahead of us when it comes to AI in particular over in the US. And so I think that is going to potentially it might throw up some issues for them. It might also be that, well, hey, things have changed. People just need instant responses. You don't necessarily need those leasing specialists on site. But, it's clear from this report that you really do. And so I think that could be a bit of a problem over in the US, depending on how it goes. Who knows? It may be that is the right way to go, and that actually we can reduce the leasing specialists over here in BTR. But like I said, judging for this report, I don't think you can personally.
I think the main message that I would take from this, and I urge everybody to read it, is, it's well publicised. The leasing sector or the housing market as a whole is having a little bit of a tough time at the moment. So you need to pull every single lever to enhance your opportunity of success and converting sales. We always say marketing is responsible for generating leads, but they're not responsible for selling. So this report and any mystery shopping or sales and marketing training that you can do is an investment into your success. So yeah, we highly recommend that people look into a service like this.
I totally agree, and obviously I know you guys can actually do that service effectively, so it's well worth reaching out to Sarah and Deanie. If they're not going to say it, I will. Now let's hear from one of our sponsor partners and our partner for the Shared Living Summit at UK Reef, Utopia.
This episode is brought to you by Utopia, the smart building platform that helps real estate owners protect the value of their assets.
From ESG compliance to energy efficiency and resident engagement, Utopia turns real-time data into action, making buildings better for people, planet and profit.
If you're in asset management or operations and care about performance, Utopia is your essential partner. Find out more at utopia.co.uk. That's utopi.co.uk.
Thanks very much to Jonathan, Ben, Chanel, and the whole team there at Utopia. Do reach out to the team at Utopia for anything sustainability or building management related. They have a wealth of data. They're also really looking to collect a lot of that data as well, and helping accommodation operators to aggregate, report on it, and help them really understand the performance of their properties. It's moving beyond sustainability into more of a sort of compulsory asset management play now, Utopia. So do reach out to those guys. So some sad news now. We saw late last week the news that Amber Energy has gone into administration. Now we don't have the full details there. We're not, expecting to. We're not looking to speculate. But from conversations with a few people, including the founder Nick and Tim Stephen as well, it's clear that this is a really tough moment for a lot of staff there. So if you've been affected by that, do feel free to reach out to Sarah, Deanie, or myself. And in times of crisis like this, we can help to sort of point you to some excellent recruiters and maybe into the right direction. But there's quite a few businesses already across the sector saying that they would be open to speaking with Amber team members and hopefully rehoming them in some way, shape or form. Now, from an operator perspective, Amber was a broker rather than an energy supplier. I would expect those contracts to be novated for the most part. I may be wrong, but that's just from my initial conversations with people. But if anyone does need to retender, then of course just follow that due process. And I'm sure that the administrators for Amber will be reaching out. So do keep reaching out to them for formal updates. But if you're facing any uncertainty or redundancy, or you want a sounding board on contracts or next steps or whatever it might be, do drop us a line, hello@housedpodcast.com. We'll do what we can to help. It may just be pointing you in the direction of some good recruiters or giving a little bit of advice. We've had a few people say they might want to do some consulting. So yeah, we're thinking of everyone there. It was only last week that we mentioned Amber and the Urban Living News round table. So it's things have moved fast there, unfortunately. But now onto the electric works. Now this throws up a question of blended living. So I don't know if you guys have really seen this. Have you seen the electric works at all, Sarah, Deanie?
Yeah, I've seen the article about it, and I think there are some words that really caught my eye, which is why I've looked at it. So DLA Architects kind of released a sort of, I guess, a paper about it, and it says blended living, community homes, shared living, multi-general living, diverse community, mixed use. like all within the space of the first paragraph. So I'm kind of like, okay, this is something that we need to look at. But what a load of terminology. Like what does that actually mean? And I know that Deanie will have strong feelings about this. So I'm not going to steal her thunder too much, but I guess I'll just sort of set the context really. It's a scheme in Woolwich in London that comprises 930 purpose-built student accommodation beds, 425 shared living studios. Again, there's just a question mark about terminology there. What is a shared living studio? But anyway, 93 new homes, which are 40% affordable. Again, 40% of 93 homes. Not a massive number, is it? And commercial and community spaces. So that's the context. And now I'm just going to throw that grenade over to Deanie to deal with.
Over to you, Deanie.
I mean, I think you all know what I'm going to say is that that's great, but that's still just blocks of different people living in different places. And it's not really shared living of just build some homes that people can live in and they can choose where they live in that building. And I think this is just it's the model we've got ourselves into, that we've got to name everything. We've got to say who's got to live here and I'm building this for this person. But I think what we know about homes is that there's not one type of student. There's not one type of person that's looking for a co-living space. There's not one type of person that's looking for later living. Everyone just wants a home and different people want different things from that home. And I just think we need to stop. It's not blended living, basically. It is still just a block with different blocks of different people, in my view, in my opinion.
Yeah, in my opinion, carefully put there. Look, it's I don't know how blended your living is when you are in those separate blocks, like you say, Deanie. I think we're maybe a bit hung up on it. I don't know. Maybe we're trying a bit too hard to shoehorn in blended living across the board and say, you know, this can be cradle to grave, because I don't know that living does need to span those generations. You know, do you want an undergraduate living with a pensioner? Like, do we really want that cradle to grave approach? Or is this more about, you know, finding your tribe, and you maybe people who are sort of 20 to 30 would live in the same kind of property, and then 30 to 40, and then 40, like, how do we actually do that? Because of course there are planning constraints, we know that, but I think we bandy that term around quite a lot, you know. It's going to be blended living or shared living or whatever it might be.
I was going to say, I just wanted to jump in there because I still think that we're making assumptions on what an undergraduate student is like and what an older pensioner is like. And I know, I mean, I've spoken about my mum before. She's 77. She's currently in Hawaii cruising around. And I don't think she'd ever want to live in a later living place. But if you said to her, actually, you can live in this place and there's loads of 20 years old there, she'd probably absolutely love it. And she'd be out with the 20-year-olds. So it's still that people will find their tribe, but tribe isn't defined by age.
No, I agree. And what this doesn't say is what are the kind of community provisions. So for example, I think I kind of have less issue, I wouldn't say in blocks, but I think that sometimes different people want different things from their home. And I can kind of understand that. Like my dad's very much like your mum, Deanie, and he's a few years older, but he lives in a later living environment and he doesn't actually like any of the things that make it a later living environment. What he does really love is his 1-bedroom apartment. He wouldn't want to live in a 13 square metre room with a shared kitchen. He probably wouldn't want to live in a 20 square metre studio either. So I think the product that he wants is probably quite different. But I think what would make this an amazing community is if all the social spaces were blended together. So all those people could come together when they want. You know, why would they not use the same gym? Why would they not use the same communal space? Why would they not, if there has to be a cinema room, you know, use a cinema room together, etc.? This article doesn't say whether any of those things are included. So I think there are ways of blending the community. Just one caveat as well is that it says multi-generational living, but we're talking here about PBSA, which means that you have to be registered as a full-time student, which is mainly going to be probably 18 to 22-year-olds, and 425 shared living studios. Now, we've talked about this at length, so I'm not going to go over old ground too much, but a studio will have a limited appeal because it's very difficult to grow a family in a studio. It's very difficult to live in a studio as you accumulate more personal possessions in your life. It doesn't say, it says shared living, so it might be that these are dual occupancy, which means that you could live with a couple, but as soon as you have a baby, you can't live there. It doesn't say whether pets are allowed. So again, there's lots of things that might be limiting that multi-generational living. And it might actually be that those studios, you do have some people in their later years living there, and the new homes as well that are being built. But I don't think, when you've got 930 purpose-built student accommodation, which makes up the vast majority of this site, I think multi-generational is very unlikely.
Well, I don't want to put words in your mouth, Sarah, but realistically, those co-living beds, do we think there'll be any students in there? I would say so. I think that's effectively a way to appease planners in some way, shape, or form, and say this isn't just students, or maybe get it through planning. I think that's the challenge that everyone in co-living has at the moment. With what should that look like? And when you've got a PBSA, when you've got a load of PBSA beds on site, and then you're talking about co-living as well, I don't think it's as simple as saying, well, that's for the graduates. Once they graduate, they can move straight on into co-living. But I'd love to see some of that data and some of those stats, because, co-living, if it's a building just on its own and trying to stand on its own 2 feet, it will have a significant portion of students. So that's not a bad thing. I'm not saying that is. It's offering something that maybe PBSA doesn't in certain places. But yeah, I think that wherever you have a huge number of PBSA on site and then co-living as well on the same site, you can probably assume that a lot of those co-living studios in particular are going to be taken up by students.
What I find really interesting about the CGIs of the kind of the social layout is it's really family orientated. So what they're expecting is these 93 homes, I'm assuming, will be families, because it looks much more made for families than anyone else when it's only 40% of those people. It's really focused on those families, but actually the majority of those people aren't going to be families at all.
No, the 93 homes is less than 10% of all units on this mixed use scheme. So yeah, I agree, Deanie. That's really interesting that you've pulled that out. We will be discussing a session about the end of residential silos at the Shared Living Summit at UK Reef in May. So if you haven't already got your ticket, please do, because we'd love to see you there and get you involved in a conversation like this and get your views on it.
Totally agree. Nice little segue that. But just before we finish on that sector, did you see the BBC article about the social hub? The student hotel was the first iteration of the social hub. If you don't know what the social hub is, there's one in Glasgow. Do go and visit it. It was the brainchild of Charlie McGregor. And this article, I don't know how they've done it. It's basically a PR piece. It's absolutely amazing. And to be fair, they are blazing a trail. And I think when you look at blended living, I think they're the only operator doing that particularly well, because they are blending student accommodation, because they have a certain percentage of their rooms for long-term students, on the slightly longer tenancy lengths. Then they have some co-living, and they have a lot of hospitality, and they have sort of effectively hotel rooms. It is the best example of blended living that I have seen. And did either of you see the article at all?
Yeah, and I mean, I'm a massive fan of the social hub. I've stayed in quite a few of them across Europe, including the one in Glasgow. And I think what it does so well is its flexibility. So it does have some shared flats, but they can be converted into kind of short stay hotel rooms as well. The one I stayed in Glasgow, it had a shared kitchen. It was a student room, but it was, they obviously at that point hadn't leased up to students just because of the timing of the year, and they managed to pivot it into a hotel stay. What this article does say, which leads back to what Deanie was saying earlier, I think Charlie McGregor cites that there are perhaps 30 different types of student. So if you take 30 different types of student, 30 different types of graduate, 30 different types of later living, you can't make a product for everybody. So when you do want to blend that living, it has to be as flexible as it can be. And what the social hub does is there's no restrictions. It doesn't say you have to be this age to live in this block, or you have to be this type of person to live in this type of room. It's suitable for everybody, and they all come together into not one communal space, many communal spaces. But again, there's no restrictions on that. It's not like this room is for students, this room is for tourists. It's everybody enjoying each other. And I know, Deanie, you went and did a co-working day, didn't you, at the one in, was it Lisbon or Porto? In Porto, and that's what you said. It was so vibrant, like all day.
Yeah, and I think that's what I was going to say, is I think what Social Hub do really well is they don't have a one size fits all in the building, but they don't have a one size fits all in the buildings around the world. They really understand actually what's going to work in those markets, and they adapt them accordingly. And the one in Porto that I was at, it had a downstairs kitchen, which the students came downstairs for a communal kitchen to cook there. So when I was in there making a cup of tea while I was working, it was the hub of life, and all nationalities just sitting, having lunch together. And it was great. And you can't get that in a hotel, and you can't get that in student accommodation. You know, we all know that we all spent a lot of time in PBSA, and whenever we're there during the day, they're quite dead spaces, whereas this absolutely wasn't, because everyone was brought down to that space. And that isn't how all social hubs are around the world, but it works for that one in Porto. And I think that is what the social hub do well, is they understand their market, and they build for that market, and they market for that market. And I think that is an important thing that we can all learn, is that they do marketing well, and they're very specific about who they're marketing to.
Yeah, I agree. But do you think that that blended living concept works so well for the social hub because of the fact that it's blended with hospitality, and that creates that buzz? Because it's far more transient. There's people in and out all the time, so it does create that constant buzz of what's going on in the community and in those social spaces. I don't think a co-living and a PBSA would be the same thing. In fact, I've got experience of that. I've run it in Southampton, which is now Abodus the Walls, of sort of 80 odd studios, and it's still very difficult to. So maybe it's the numbers. But it is very difficult to get people out of their rooms, especially when it's just studios. I think that the social hub being hospitality and student, that's a really nice combination, and that is the sweet spot of flexibility, because they're offering one night stays, no problem at all. Of course you pay for it. It's not like that's the equivalent price as it would be to a PBSA room on a nightly rate, but still I think that is the way that the direction of travel for PBSA at the moment seems to be having to offer more flexibility. And the student hotel, sorry, the social hub, I don't know why I can't get out of that, but the social hub is way further on than anyone else. They've got that product mixed just right. And I remember being at Roundhill, I've said this before, seeing this come across the desk, and no investors could really kind of get their heads around it. Is it hospitality? Is this a hotel? Is this student accommodation? What is it? All the investors that I spoke to passed on it because they were like, no, don't understand the concept. I was like, I think this is probably going to be the future. So yeah, it's great to see them doing so well.
I think to your question about how do you get that kind of convergence of people, I think it depends who the people are. I think we discussed And Soul, which has a similar kind of co-living / hospitality setup, and it varies from location to location, and they have to work out what works in a particular location the same way that the social hub does. It's not going to work everywhere. So I think in an area where you maybe have a lot of people working from home, I think that kind of co-working space would work really well and complement students. But also the social hub, I think in all of their areas, they have a cafe, restaurant that is open to the public as well. So even if people aren't there kind of working or hanging out during the day who are residents, you've got that constant throng of people that are coming in to get something to eat, which you don't get in PBSA and BTR on the whole. So I don't think it has to be in a hotel style environment, but we've said this before, we would love to see those underutilized social spaces opened up to the public more, as ancillary income, but also to create that buzz, to create that atmosphere and to really utilize those spaces. And again, we're going to be talking about flexibility at UK Reef as well. So there's lots of kind of topics that are really kind of thought-provoking that create this kind of debate really. But I think what we're saying is that there has to be a move towards more flexibility. We don't need to put labels on things. And, to our original article, whether it's mixed use, multi-generational, co-living, whatever it is, doesn't really matter. It just has to be the right product for the right people in the right place at the right price.
Nice. Yeah, I totally agree. I've only just found out as well that Anne Soul is was actually created by Reza, who created the Collective. That was brand new information to me this week. But yeah, look forward to going and seeing that one as well. Do go and check out the Social Hub if you get a chance in Glasgow or anywhere else around Europe. And actually, talking about what you just mentioned there, the Sugar Cube in Sheffield is a really good example with great co-working, social space, cafe, really lively, and then sort of 50 studios above it. So we need to be a bit more creative. We're just building boxes at the moment, and we've got to definitely get more creative with the flexibility and that blending, truly blended living. But anyway, on to our next sponsor now. Let's hear from Wash Station.
Wash Station proudly sponsor this episode of Housed. We provide best-in-class laundry solutions that complement your buildings. Wash Station. Smart, green, clean.
Thanks ever so much to John and the team at Wash Station. Really grateful to have you on board. Do reach out to them if you have any laundry requirements at all. Whether you just want a second opinion on what you've currently got, or you're looking for a brand new fit out, do get in touch with John and the team there as well. And if you want us to get in touch with them, do reach out to us as well. So now I'd like to talk about Unite. So Unite students had their quarterly earnings call with investors, and they put out their earnings report just last week. And it's just showcasing that the market is tougher right now, to be completely honest. When you think about the fact they're sort of looking to shelve some of their BTR from the looks of it, their BTR project. And they've obviously just taken over Empiric, that had quite a tough time towards the end of the season, with Chinese postgrads in particular. And the occupancy wasn't quite what it has been in previous years. Don't get me wrong; it's still very good occupancy. I think this is the thing where we probably need a bit of perspective here. But there's a lot of talk in the markets about Unite being a bellwether for the sector, and I think that's exactly what we're seeing right now. From my side of things, I think every operator is really feeling the pinch, whether it's occupancy or revenue. We know that because we're doing more performance reports than we ever have about specific properties. But I think that's where Unite, they have to talk about it, whereas everyone else does that behind closed doors. Sarah Deeney, did you happen to catch any of the call or anything?
I mean, I've seen the kind of the conversations and the press around it, but I think I agree with you with your point is that they just have to make these conversations public. I guess as a sector, we're quite lucky in that respect because people can see it, and maybe there's a bit of reassurance in that if Unite are saying it's tough, it's a bit like, whew, yeah, it's tough for us as well. And if Unite are saying it, then it must be true. It's just that other operators don't have to talk about it as well. We said this before a few weeks ago. I think we admire their honesty and the fact that they have been bold enough to shelve some projects that they felt were not going to succeed in this market. And I just think that's really healthy. So I don't think there's no shade or no shame on Unite. As we said, they have to be honest. And I think it is a indication of a tough sector, and operators need to work harder. And we've said it a million times. There's, the people that are finding it tough need to look at their product, their pricing, and their marketing, their staffing, all of those things to kind of really compete in this market at this time.
I think it's telling the story of the times in a way. And I think, like you say, Dan, this is still strong occupancy. This isn't a bad story on occupancy. It's just not as high as it has been traditionally in the past because it's been a darling of investors, because it's been able to target kind of 97-98% occupancy, and that's been able to be achieved. And when you look at kind of other investment sectors around hospitality, which is 65 to 80% on average, it's still performing well from an investor perspective. So I kind of think this is an opportunity for the market really to look at that flexibility, to look at actually it's not all going to be about those leases that are sold at one point and they're in there for the whole of the time, and actually there's more opportunity there. So I see it as an opportunity for the sector to kind of actually look at how it talks about occupancy, how it markets itself, and how it shifts for the world we're currently in now.
I think when you look at what they're actually saying, they're saying we're going to double down on the core focus of Russell Group universities. that is sensible, because there's a flight to quality. Everybody is going to those Russell Group universities, not the tier 2, tier 3 universities in particular. So why would you focus on those? Then they've canned the two big projects that they had on. Well, yeah, because they would then be in the value gap. If you actually built those through, you'd probably have to charge 350 quid a week for an ensuite. That's just not viable. That's not Unite product. So I think that's again where they've got, that's actually it's a bold call. But personally, I think that's the right call, and it shows the government that actually we have a real problem with viability, and I think leading on from that, you've also then got the problem across BTR as well. So Unite shelving their BTR plans, the fact that they were, originally looking at how do we really go into that. You look at John Lewis Partnership stopping all of their BTR and canning that. Then you look at Amro stopping their latest BTR project and switching that to apart hotels. And it starts to paint a really bad picture for BTR in particular, but for the government as a whole in terms of why are they shelving this? Well, it's because of viability, because cost of capital, cost of build, etc., all of those good things. But it's the building safety regulator as well. It's the Renters' Rights Act. It's the lack of support for developers. It's the planning regime, and the government have an opportunity to actually support the sector, the rental living sector, and they still don't seem to be doing it. So I think it wasn't the easiest call, I'm sure, for Joe Lister at Unite, but it's set amongst the context of a trickier time in PBSA in the UK in particular, because we are a mature market now. There's no two ways about it. And the numbers are looking a little bit shaky, especially in postgrads, but, for the demand for student accommodation over the course of the next few years. Then you look at 2030 to 2040, and it, with the drop off in domestic students, and it does start to look a bit of a challenge there. And when I say the drop off in domestic students, there are less 18-year-olds in the UK, and therefore the likelihood is there will be less school leavers going to university, unless that, the percentage of those school leavers that go to university jumps significantly. So there could be a 20% drop off in university students from a domestic UK perspective. But then BTR just really struggling to stand on its own 2 feet in that sense for new developments. Anyone who's already off, out of the ground and operating, is typically doing pretty well. So it's just a bit of a challenging time in the market at the moment. But anyway, let's now move on to our last sponsor, Howden.
Howden is the 5th largest employee-owned business in the UK and one of the largest insurance groups globally. With over 60 years' experience, Howden's specialist education division delivers tailored insurance, risk management, and wellbeing solutions for the education sector.
They're the trusted partner of nearly 1,000 schools, colleges, universities, and student accommodation providers across the UK.
Howden helps owners and operators protect what matters most, and so they are the perfect sponsors for Housed. Thank you for coming on board for season 6.
Thanks very much to the team at Howden for sponsoring us. Do get in touch with them if you have any insurance needs across the board for BTR, PBSA, universities, any kind of housing or accommodation needs. Howden are the people for whether it's contents insurance or development insurance. Do reach out to them. Very grateful for their sponsorship and their support. And then we just want to touch slightly on a UK loneliness report by COHO. Now that it's discussing the role of shared living in that. So Sarah Deeney, I don't know if you saw that, but it basically said more than half of people who experience loneliness feel it at least once a week. And that's around 57%. But for 16%, it's every single day. And 1 in 5 people aged 26 to 35 feel lonely every day, the highest rate of any demographic. And that is the demographic that should be, enjoying shared living to its max, in my opinion. They're working age adults, many of them in shared housing or living with their partners and surrounded by people, but they're feeling increasingly disconnected. So, Sarah Deeney, did you see that? And what are the takeouts that you that you get from this report?
Firstly, the methodology is it was a survey of 3,000 residents living in HMOs, so it's not insignificant. So I think we should pay attention to the data. There's one thing that I just keep coming back to time and time again, and I know it's not going to be popular with a lot of our listeners. It's about matching residents thoughtfully together. I think, I don't think it's acceptable that people living in a shared living environment are feeling lonely so much, so often. And is a lot of that because they're living with people that don't share their values, don't share their interests. And, we've seen it a lot in student accommodation, students making their dinner or their lunch and then going to sit in their bedrooms by themselves. And that's usually because they don't want to sit around talking to the people in their flat because they've got nothing in common with them, and we've had this conversation a lot with universities. We've had this conversation a lot with PBSA operators. I'm sure people in co-living communities are having exactly the same conversations as well. And I don't know whether I buy the argument, if I'm completely honest, that putting people together without any matching brings resilience and it gives them the opportunity to resolve conflict. I think it's a lack of operational staff, a lack of time, and a lack of technology that they don't want to do it, rather than they don't want to do it because they don't think it's ethically the right thing. I mean, I really wouldn't want to live with people that I don't like and have nothing in common with. I really wouldn't. So why are we kind of enforcing people to do that?
Doesn't this close the loop on what we talked about with blended living? Like, I think we're all the same. You want to live with your tribe. You want to live with your kind of people, typically. And why are we just teaching resilience, albeit, I saw Sam Altman, who's the CEO of OpenAI, saying he was asked what should we be teaching our kids, and everyone was expecting him to say, oh yeah, STEM and maths and coding and whatever, and he was like, teach them resilience and adaptability. But that worries me. Is that what we're preparing people for? Can't we just create a harmonious community that really gets on? That should be the key.
I think it's interesting you mentioned tech there, Dan, because I think my overriding kind of thing that I thought was missing from this report is technology. There was no mention about technology. And I have always kind of been a big believer since going to the US many, many years ago, in my time at Campus Living Villages, to a kind of mental health university conference, and they showed a report around kind of the research into kind of the invention of social media and mental health in young people, and there is a direct correlation. So I kind of feel that this is missing, that actually, and it's not necessarily what co-living can do. They can't take people's phones away from them, but I do think that there is something going on in society whereby whilst we're the most connected we've ever been, we're also the most loneliest we've ever been. And that's because most of that connection is done at distance through technology, not in person. And that was a thing for me that felt there was missing. There's no mention of it that I could see in the report at all. And I guess thinking back to kind of what buildings can do about that, there's not a lot they can do in some respects, but is there ways that they can make phone-free spaces? Is there a way that they can create this thing that actually people come together without their devices, without anything, and then connect on that way? So you get that habit. And, and I'm in a family environment where my kids are getting older, that are getting phones, and me and Martin are trying to reframe our behaviour around devices to kind of say, actually, no, we're going to lock them away now because we're going to go away and have some family time. And in a way, is that part of what we need to do? We need to create these spaces where actually we don't feel, so how often do we go to the pub and everyone's phones is on the table? Whether they're looking at them or not, they're still there. And it kind of feels that we do need to think about everything that's impacting loneliness and mental health, and it isn't just one thing.
But I think what you're saying doesn't need to be prescribed, because I think it would be organic. If you're living with people that you enjoy spending time with, then you're not going to be in your room on your own on your phone. So I don't know that necessarily the spaces need to give people permission for that, although it would help. And I'm probably speaking from my own personal experience as well, that, if there was a room that I knew that I had to lock my phone away, then I would. But actually, I think if you're in a shared flat and you're in a kitchen and living room with nice people that you enjoy spending time with, that maybe you play board games with, or you play darts with, or you go out together, then you're going to be using your phones less anyway, and you're going to be having that connection. I think the loneliness comes in when you feel like your only space that you feel comfortable and feel your true self in is your room, and then you're on your phone and on devices probably. I mean, Bethany, my stepdaughter who's at university, she does like her flatmates, but after the initial kind of freshers couple of weeks kind of finished, I think they realised that they didn't actually have as much in common as they thought they did. And now they don't mind each other, but they live quite different lives within their flat, and they're not eating together. Bethany's vegan and her flatmates are not vegan, and I know to some people that don't share that lifestyle that might seem trivial, but actually it's a big thing for her. And there's been some unkind comments from flatmates about her choice of food. So she probably doesn't feel like her true self in the flat, because she's kind of got to pick a time where she can go into the kitchen by herself and make her own food. That makes me really sad. But that could have been so solved with a simple question, what are your dietary preferences? Okay. And they can't always guarantee that. And I think that's the one thing that PBSA is not able to do, is if you've got a 8-person flat and you've only got 6 vegans, you're not going to have 2 empty beds just because you can't place vegans in those 2 rooms from a commercial point of view. So I know it's difficult, but I just think we can do better.
I am off to Vegas, there's the second time I've said it, next Sunday. So I'll report back, because the US are further ahead in terms of their roommate matching technology, both the PMSs and also the sort of proprietary ancillary prop tech partners. So because I you need to find your tribe, especially at university, but also beyond that into co-living and even later living. That is what we'll have to do. And yeah, you're right, Sarah. You can imagine an entire flat full of vegans. I think that is the kind of thing that would work. But then at what point do you then become an echo chamber or in silos? Does that matter if that is the case? Anyway, definitely something to report back on there, but really interesting report from COHO, so worth a listen. And that's a wrap for this episode. I was in charge today, so absolutely no surprises that we've run way over time, but we had a lot to catch up on there. So thanks so much for listening. We'll be back next week for more news, views and insights from the rented shared living sectors. Do get in touch if you want to discuss sponsoring the Shared Living Summit at UK Reef. We still have a couple of slots available, but they are selling fast. And also, we appreciate all your messages and feedback. Do keep them coming. And of course, let us know what you want us to keep discussing as well. And if you're feeling super kind and generous, please do review us. And don't forget to like and subscribe and follow and all those lovely things. Thanks ever so much for listening, and we'll see you next week.